Hi, I'm James McGrail, the newest member of the Applied Anthropology Network team. I'm going to be taking over editing, hosting, and publishing the podcast version of AAN events like this one. Today, you'll hear from Kevin Echraghi, who founded the organization hérétique. In this impulse, Kevin takes us inside the Silicon Valley Playbook. He demonstrates the 10 commandments of software innovation before challenging this new dogma, which has spread beyond California to traditional companies, politics, and even universities. Kevin's organization, hérétique, challenges this status quo by asking what innovation can look like when we break these rules. Kevin then poses the challenging question: based on anthropological theories, what framework would you build to replace the existing one? You can find Kevin on Twitter at GuiveKev. Now, without further ado, here's Kevin Echraghi.
I'm really happy to be here with you and to have been part of the conversations and understanding better what you're trying to do. It may be the first time that I'm talking to a group of anthropologists, so I hope you will find what I will present you interesting, and I'm really hopeful of being able to gather also knowledge and perspectives from you in return. So I hope this will be really interesting. Let me just share my screen. All right. So I founded, I guess I started working on it 2 years ago, but it really came out last year, a company, an organization called hérétique. And what we do at hérétique is we imagine, we craft, and we share digital alternatives. So this may seem like a very conceptual notion, but I will give you more details about what it means. But basically, we have 3 types of activities. We do some research, private research on the subject. We develop products and services, and we do some consulting, training, and teaching activities for different type of groups. So teaching in universities and training and consulting for private companies and also public entities like the Council of the European Union. So a really different bunch of people. So as I was telling you, what we are focusing on is basically digital alternatives, and what it means is basically anything that goes against the digital standards. And the digital standards, to be really quick, are have been set by the tech giants that conquered the world, that started in California and Silicon Valley, and then conquered Europe, South America, Africa, and then have seen their clones emerge in Korea, in China, in India, and have put a model that everyone seeks to copy now. And you have all these startups like Uber, Deliveroo, Netflix, Spotify that go in the same flow, and also big companies, traditional old companies trying to adopt the same model. And so the question that I've always looked at, so before we're looking at the strategies, and now I'm more looking at the ideologies of these actors, is what do they have in common? And so usually I do some kind of exercise, which I call digital autopsy. So, but now I'll give you just the answers. So I have identified 10 things that seem really important to me in regards to their view on innovation. First, they believe in changing the world through technical innovation. So Larry Page, the founder of Google, Sergey and I founded Google because we're super optimistic about the potential for technology to make the world a better place. How do they want to do that? Basically with digital technologies. So what they do is they try to connect, digitize, modelize, and automate everything and everyone. Facebook was built to accomplish a social mission, make the world more open and connected. Our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So connecting, modelizing, digitizing, and also automating, we can see everywhere. The last and more pervasive example is Gmail, that tries to complete all your emails now. So automating your thinking, your decision, and action. They build tools to solve problems for consumers and producers, which is something really important to me. So there's really a focus on problems. So Facebook aspires to build services and wants to focus on solving the most important problems. And who they do that for? For customers. And we'll be challenging these statements afterwards. The tools they built essentially provide 4 things. They provide comfort, predictability, volume, and efficiency. So if you look at Google Maps, it won't tell you what is the most beautiful itinerary. It won't tell you the one you don't know or the one you like. It will tell you just the more efficient and quick from point A to point B. And the CEO of Tencent, a company that does WeChat, says the primary goal for technology should be helping humankind increase efficiency. They structure marketplaces to connect consumers to producers. So if you look, there's always two sides, and they connect two sides, the demand side and the supply side. Someone wants to know something, and someone wants to explain something, they connect on Google. Someone wants to buy, someone wants to sell, they connect on Amazon, etc., etc. And how do they make money? Basically, they exploit humans as resources to generate profits. So they extract the attention, the time, the data, the knowledge of the users to generate profits. Here, Sean Parker, which was the first Facebook president, Facebook exploits a vulnerability in human psychology to consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, that tells us we actually compete with sleep. So they're trying to extract all the time we have, even the sleep time we have. Strategy-wise, what they strive to do is to conquer the world through entrepreneurship and through exponential growth. And you have Peter Thiel, the founder of PayPal, and Palantir, which is the software used by all intelligence services, that says if you're a startup, you want to get to a monopoly. So really, that's an ambition. And he says competition is for losers. Last three ones, while striving to conquer the world, what they do is prioritize their vision and their selfish interest over the common good, and they try to escape collective decisions. And you have Eric Schmidt, which was the ex-president of Google and now works at the Pentagon, that says, I wake up every morning and I fight regulation. It's what I do. It's my job. And that's why they don't obey all competition law, work law, tax law, any law that goes behind them and their grand vision has to be escaped. While doing all that, there are two things they don't really look at. The first thing is the present. So they sacrifice the present and the past to the future, and they always live in their vision, justifying their current impacts by the vision, the grand vision that they are offering. And this quote from Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, I like. He says, often invention requires a long-term willingness to be misunderstood. So if you criticize Amazon, it's not because there is something wrong with it. It's because we are stupid and we don't understand what Jeff Bezos is doing. And the last thing is they refuse any cultural or territorial anchors. So they act like they don't belong anywhere. And so if you take any service, Google Maps or Google or Facebook or Uber, it's the same anywhere in the world, or even Tinder. So here you have Uber in all these cities across the world. Even if our practices, our cultural background, our relationship to love, to communication are different, the apps we use don't take into account any of the differences we may have. And this one is about territory and physical existence, which is from the Declaration of Independence of the cyberspace. Your concepts of property, expression, identity, movement, and context do not apply to us. They are all based on matter, and there is no matter here. So these are the 10 major common points I identify, and we can group them in 5 groups, saying first, these actors are obsessive. They want to put digital technologies everywhere at the full capacity for everyone. They are reductionist, so they just seek it. They just look at solving problems for consumers by bringing efficiency. They are extractive, so they structure themselves to extract value from the users and monetize it. Imperialistic, so they strive to conquer the world without following any rules or anything. And they are soilless, so they don't care about the present, the past, the territory, and the culture. And so this is what I call the Silicon Valley playbook. And so this playbook is being copy-pasted everywhere. So it's being copy-pasted in companies and universities. So here are examples from France, but we have books that says Uberize your company. So everyone is trying to Uberize its own company and bring back the model. And in universities, Polytechnique, which is the best university in France, trying to be work like a startup or bring startup programs. And at the core of the state, we have our president that says, I want France to be a startup nation, a nation that thinks and moves like a startup. So this concept of startup nation is basically these 10 points I was trying to show you. And this is happening even if on many aspects this model is a failure. So I don't have the time really to dig into it, but it's obviously for Europeans an economic failure. We haven't been able to structure digital giants that are as big as the American actors. Our old industries are being destroyed, and there's huge increase in unemployment, etc., etc. So really not a good model for us. It's a political failure. Again, our socio-political framework doesn't fit at all with the Uber and Deliveroo models and all these new models. It's a societal failure. You have addiction, you have manipulation, psychological problems, democratic problems, and ecological failure. The digital industry now is represent 4% of the greenhouse gas emissions worldwide, and is set to reach 8% in the next 5 years. And what really interests me the most, these things are really important, it's also a creative failure. There are so many things that we do as humans, or that we feel that are not translated into digital technologies, and now digital technologies are taking all the time of our living, and so all these things are being lost. Intuition, beauty, imagination, idleness, sadness, mystery, surprise, patience, all these things are disappearing. And one thing that is really clear to me is that these failures are inherent to the model. If your business model is to extract people's attention, then necessarily you will promote fake news, and necessarily you will create addiction mechanisms. It's not a collateral effect, it's the way it works. If you think regulation is something to be broken, necessarily you will distort the social-political landscape. And so the question is, why do we keep doing the same thing over and over again when we know it doesn't work? So the question is now, why do we keep doing the same thing over and over again when it obviously doesn't work politically, economically, socially, ecologically? And the conclusion I've been coming to is that we have faith in the model. And so we have faith, and the playbook I was just showing you are basically commandments. It's something that now we all reproduce, all companies reproduce, without even bothering to ask why are we reproducing this model. So through technology, the world you shall change, everything and everyone you shall connect, digitize, modelize, and automate. To solve consumer problems, tools you shall develop, etc., etc. And so this metaphor is something that is, I guess, powerful and may seem exaggerated, but it's something that makes sense when you look at it. You have prophecies. Mark Andreessen, which is one of the most powerful VC venture capitalists in the Silicon Valley, so says software is eating the world. So he said that in 2011, and now it has become a big sentence in the innovation world. You have prophets. Duke Cutting, which is the founder of Hadoop, which is a big data software, says Google is living a few years in the future and sends the rest of us messages. So this is Google is a prophet and is sending us messages about what's happening in the future. You have gospels like Jesus is born in a stable, and all startups are born in a garage, and you have all this mythology of the garage and how they're born. And this one is my favorite. It's called it's what I call Elon's Ark. So it's Elon Musk justifying about SpaceX that says, if there's a third world war, we want to make sure there's enough seeds of human civilization elsewhere on Mars to bring it back and shorten the length of the dark ages. So it's really taking the same stories and repackaging them for 2021. And so I have a lot of different more examples about this metaphor. I decided to make them short, but if you want to discuss the metaphor, I'll be happy to. And so the question is, what should we do if we think that we are now following some kind of dogma about digital innovation? And so the first answer is we just need to stop believing and start questioning the model in itself and not just its impacts, because we see a lot in the media questioning the impacts, but a few times you see the core model being questioned. Everyone seems to argue that these actors have consequences, but these consequences can be mitigated without changing the core architecture. And to me, the person that said it best is Philippe Breton. And he said, in the face of what appears to be a new cult, I plead for a secularization of techniques, a separation of the quasi-religious beliefs that some develop about new technologies from their practical, pragmatic use. So that's what we're trying to do. And basically, the way we do this is freeing ourselves from this dogma and these commandments and saying that none of this is compulsory and we can change at will any of these commandments and do whatever we feel like. And one way to being convinced of to convince ourselves that we can change it is realizing that these commandments and this model is not a revealed truth. It's the produce of the combination of different ideologies. And I won't go in details about these ideologies, but you have cybernetics, you have objectivism, you have the frontier myth, you have technological solutionism. And if you don't know these, I invite you to dig deeper, but probably you do know some of them. Cybernetics is basically a theory that tends to represent the world as a graph of information, saying we can all build a world where we'll network with machines, and when we won't have any institutions, we can auto-regulate our society through the exchange of information. Objectivism is the morality of rational selfishness, and it's an advocate for separation of the economy and the state, so no regulation. The frontier myth is the entrepreneur, the world as a place to conquer for the braves. And technological solutionism is technology as a solution to all our problems. So there are many ideologies, but these four are really at the roots of the Silicon Valley model that we can see. And there are many different types of ideologies, many other theories that we could be using to build digital technologies. And in my opinion, I'm not suggesting, I'm not saying that I have an ideology that I prefer and I would like to be the new dogma. I'm just saying that we need to open the box again and try new stuff, because what we've been trying to do obviously doesn't really work. And so digital technologies are a material we can craft. It's, to me, I see digital technologies like wood, like a material. And I'm asking myself, haven't we spent the past 20 years building bow and arrows with the same wood when we could have built violins and chessboards and something else? And so maybe we should try to use the same material to build things that are completely different, that are not just an improvement of a bow, but are something that have a different usage and are looking for a really different goal. And so how do we do that? Basically, we challenge the playbook. And so we move from an imperialistic model to a diplomatic model. And this is something you can see in the open source movement or the platform cooperativism movement that seek to build companies and technologies that that are community-based and they are not controlled by a centralized entity. We can move from an extractive model to a protective model. So protect our data, protect our attention, protect our knowledge. And the more simple things you can see emerge is services like hey.com or ProtonMail, which are services that make you pay for the service instead of extracting your data for the service. And so ProtonMail is in Switzerland, it's €5 per month, and you have a really sleek email service that protects your data, and you just pay for it. But this is not the most interesting part to me. The most interesting part to me are these three, the soulless, reductionist, and obsessive parts of the dogma. And we need to move to a rooted innovation, rich innovation, and relevant innovation. And so what do I mean by that? Basically, it's moving from an innovation that is taught as one services for all to an innovation that is rooted in a territory, rooted in a community, in a tradition, in a way of life. Moving from solving problems to reinstating a practice, developing a skill, defending a right, provoking emotion, enriching a culture, upholding a value, realizing a dream, rekindling a memory. So basically, we need to enrich our vocabulary. We've been focusing on solving problems, and this limits our thinking and creativity so much that it limits the product and services we build. Moving away from the consumer to the citizen, the child, the romantic, the artist, the explorer, the worker, the timid, the joker, the French, the American, the Canadian, the Chilean, etc., etc. And moving most of all from comfort, predictability, performance, efficiency to intuition, imagination, solidarity, dignity, sensuality, surprise, etc., etc. And the final one being moving from connecting, digitizing, modelizing, automating to disconnecting, hiding information, randomizing information, humanizing processes and services. So really taking the model from an opposite point of view. And so to basically show you what that can bring to the table, I'm going to present you one of our projects that I like, and I hope you will like too. That is called Dérive. And Dérive comes from the thinking that New York is a city that is quite large with big avenues, long distances. It's made for cars, and so necessarily, if you want to go from point A to point B, you will want to take the quicker route. So most of the American cities are a bit like that, and so you use Google to optimize your itinerary from point A to point B. But if you go in a city like Paris, it's a city that has a more complex urbanistic plan. You have streets that smell good, some smell bad, some with light, some darkness. Sometimes you have parks, and sometimes you have monuments. And it's cities that historically we've moved in more with intuition than with optimization. And so Google is not basically the best way for us to move from point A to point B. And if you look at history, Paris is a city that gave birth to what was called the wanderer, the flaneur. Sorry, the flaneur was this persona that was just getting lost in the city and in the streets, and was trying to discover his city. And Victor Hugo said, "Wandering is human, flâner is Parisian." And if you compare that to what Google says about moving around, it's a really different perspective. The technology advocate of Google said, if you have a mobile phone with Google Maps, you can go anywhere on the planet and have confidence that we can give you directions to get to where you want to go safely and easily. No human ever has to feel lost again. So this is really something that conflicts with the flaneur vision. And so what we wanted to do is reinstate the act of strolling, reinstate la flânerie. So really not solving problems, but reinstate a practice. And so we built an app that's called Dérive, and the concept is really simple. You are here, you want to go to Châtelet, for example, in Paris, and basically we'll just give you the direction and the distance, nothing more, nothing less. And so you will be sure that you arrive to your point of destination, but in the meantime, you can choose the directions that you prefer, either a street you know and you want to take again, or one you don't know and you want to explore. So we're really trying to minimize information at the maximum for you to be able to take more, to be more active and follow your intuition. The second thing we wanted to build is something to spark surprise. So we built an additional service that lets you send a Dérive to one of your friends and ask and hide the destination. So you want to send him to a restaurant, you send him a link, he will click on it, and it will say secret destination, and he will just have the direction and the distance. And so there will be surprise and mystery. He has to go there to discover where you're sending him. And once he arrives, then a message will pop up and you say, I sent you there because it reminds us, it reminded me of our trip to Lisboa or anywhere. And this is something that's really fascinating to me because It's something that technically has been possible for 20 years. There's no really technical innovation behind it, but it's something that's never been done before. And so it's really, it's really something that shows that we've been focused on efficiency and transparency and all these values, and so we forgot a whole scope of different type of innovations. And so the last thing we wanted to do is encourage adventure and self-adventure. So how do I put myself in a position where I take risks and I play with simple things. And so we're building playlists. And so like this one called 99 cantines, 99 canteens. And so we put 99 restaurants that are good and cheap in Paris on a web page. And you go there and you just click go, and it will send you to a random restaurant in the list. So just for your lunch, usually you go on Google, you look at the ratings, you look at the pictures, do you like it or not? Here, you will put yourself in a position to risk it. You go to the restaurant. If you like it, you enter. If you don't like it, you just choose a different one. So if we take a step back, Derive, in my opinion, is rich, relevant, protective, diplomatic, and anchored. It's rich because it's not trying to solve a problem, it's trying to reinstate a practice. It is for the flâneurs, not the consumers, and it's trying to spark surprise and develop the sense of orientation, so a different objective. It's relevant because it's not using more technology than it needs. What we try to do is to minimize the quantity of information at the maximum to just keep the only information that you need to go from your point A to point B. So ultra low data, there is no computation and no automation. It's protective. So we save zero data about anyone because we don't need to do computation. It's an invitation to minimize usage. We want you to fix your direction and put the phone in your pocket. And it's a human scale business model. It's diplomatic, so it's only available in France. We're not looking to conquer the world. It's something you can experience when you come to France and you can walk with it. And it's anchored, so it's developed in Paris for Parisians, and it's also super low ecological impact because there's no computation, and it encourages you to walk from point A to point B. So digital technologies are a material we can craft, and this is the message I wanted to convey. And we have put some really specific methodologies, not specific, I say fun methodologies we're trying to work with. Once is called Once Upon a Time that we do with our students at Sciences Po. And basically we ask them to abandon one of the current technologies for a technology that is 20 years old for a week, and to try to look at it and live this experience. And then there are three questions. How was it before? What was better? How is it now? What is better? And then we ask them to mix it up. So trying to bring the best of both worlds. And so it's a way of anchoring the usage of their technologies in the reality, their culture, their territory. And so they come up with really cool innovation on photography, on music, on information. It's really a fun exercise. And another one we do is called Animistic Design. And so we ask ourselves, who is inside our apps? And so we built an imaginary world that is called Algoville, saying you have a city in your phone with a bunch of algorithms that do stuff in each of the applications. And so you have, for example, the speed algorithm that seeks to always promote what makes you gain more time. You have the cocoon algorithm that tries to personalize. You have the spy algorithms. You have the algorithms, Puri, I don't know how to translate, but he's the one that is trying to push you content that is sponsored. You have the dealer algorithm that tries to make something that's addictive, the hype algorithm that tries to push things that are the most recent. And so we try to look at apps with these personas and then trying to replace them and say, okay, let's take off speed and replace it with a lazy algorithm, what would he tell you? He would tell you it's just this way. I don't know more, just go this way. So we try to play with these methodologies. So the future is open, it's time to explore again, and I invite you to become an hérétique.
Hi, me again, here to quickly recap Kevin's talk before we get into the discussion. Kevin points to several key aspects of the Silicon Valley dogma. This vision of innovation attempts to make the world a better place by connecting and digitizing everything. They do this by focusing on creating tools which solve problems for consumers with the ultimate aim of efficiency. They connect consumers who want something to producers who want to provide that thing. In order to make money from this service, they exploit humans to extract attention and time. Their aim strategically is to conquer the world or to monopolize their particular market. To conquer all, they must act as if they are not from anywhere. This way, their software can work universally. In order to do this, they deprioritize the collective in favor of their vision. This includes fighting regulation, ignoring the past, and justifying their impact. In other words, in their mind, the end justifies the means. Kevin points out how these ideals can be grouped into 5 characteristics: obsessive, reductionist, extractive, imperialist, and a denial of the past, present, and territory. This model is being replicated everywhere, despite it being a failure economically, politically, societally, ecologically, and creatively. These failures are inherent to the model. For example, if you aim to extract attention, you necessarily create addiction mechanisms. So why do we keep replicating a failing system? Kevin says it's because we have faith in the model. So Kevin and hérétique ask the question, what would happen if we stopped believing and challenged the model? To this end, they created Darive, a mapping app which gives you a direction of travel and nothing else. This way, users re-engage with the city around them as they travel, reintroducing the practice of wandering, or as it's known in Paris, flâner. The app is only available in Paris, linking back to a Parisian practice of sauntering and observing. This app demonstrates the possibilities of software innovation if we choose to do something different. Now back to Kevin for his challenging question.
So the question I wanted to ask you is this one. Is based on anthropological theories and methodologies, can you build a framework that could replace the problem-solving approach to produce digital innovations? So what can we do? How can we look at the world to produce innovations without focusing on problem solving, which is now the most common practice when trying to produce innovations?
Awesome. No, that's great. I mean, virtual round of applause for Kevin. I think that was really, really inspiring and informative. Thanks so much. The next step would be, maybe this time I want to turn it around because we are not so many people this time. I think maybe we just open up the floor for anyone to ask Kevin a question or follow up on a thought, give some feedback or a comment. And then let's just say how this discussion develops. And obviously you can also say something or share your opinion about this question that Kevin just posed. And I think Kevin just leave it on the screen maybe.
Works for me. It's here. You can see it.
Yeah. So you can really just shout out now, anyone. I'm not gonna.
Yes. So in the case of what is, for instance, a good way to replace a problem-solving approach. And by the way, thanks, Kevin, for this illuminating talk. I've enjoyed it a lot. Definitely because you really tackled this predicament of innovation head on. But what could be a good way to attack it is to change it by a more dialogical way of thinking. This, for instance, we know this as, dialectical thinking. We have a problem, we have a reaction, with a solution. If you go more dialectical, it's something that actually has been mentioned during the last Fuck Up Friday, I think. It's also what defines, or mutually defines, for instance, the market's thinking and the anthropological thinking, or the business thinking and anthropological thinking. Anthropological thinking is always dialogical and always explores things. In that kind of way, it's actually already exemplified by the technology that you showcase to us via Derive, in the sense that you have this rudimentary display, rudimentary interface that lets you explore more things instead of just going to the solution and just cut to the chase. In that kind of sense, I think that anthropologists have been employing this technique for over centuries, at least the last century they have. But it has been more explorative, and has been, and in a certain way, you can also say that it starts from the body. It starts from an existential point of view. That's what I know from my background. For instance, I am a little bit more versed in existential anthropology. And from that point of view, we know that it's more important to know what makes life worth livable, and what makes life worth livable is something that enriches us in a way, and that can be very sensorial. Like, yeah, I'm just going to stop here, maybe to make it more suggestive for other people to fill in the gap. But it's something I can give you, yeah. The difference between dialectical thinking and dialogical thinking, and that we have to think more about what makes life more worth livable and what reaches us sensorially.
Super cool, thank you.
Hey, Kevin, this was a really great talk. Thanks so much. It actually dovetails really well with some of my own research. So for context, I worked with the Stockholm startup ecosystem for my research. And one of the things that I found really interesting is the way these ideologies become embedded within people's practice. And so often the entrepreneurs that I worked with did not come in with these ideologies. They weren't trying to solve problems or fix everything with technology, but they kind of ended up on that path anyway. And so for me, I think as an anthropologist, it was really interesting to look at the way infrastructures created a kind of curriculum that taught people how to believe these things and implement them within their practice. And so for me, I think one of the things as anthropologists we can do is come in as strategists within these ecosystems to help generate new ways of thinking about how we distribute resources, how just the circulation of certain facts and ideas enculturate people into these practices. Especially because often I think people come in with the kind of broad ideas that you've talked about of wanting to do that. But when the only resources available to you, or the only resources you know of are those like venture capital and other kinds of risk investment that put forward scaling and those kinds of ideologies that you can't really escape if you don't know there are other resources available.
Really interesting.
Interesting add-on too, yeah. Does anyone else want to add something, or does anyone have a question for Kevin? Then in this case, the question, I will post the question again in the chat too, and read it out loud. Based on anthropological theories and methodologies, how could we build a framework that could replace the problem solving approach to produce digital innovations? Does anyone have an idea or want to share something? I'm sure that many things are rather obvious, and let's see how we can dive into these topics then on the go.
Maybe I can leave you for 5 minutes just to change.
Absolutely, Kevin, take a break if you want. Yeah.
Make it a group work, and so I come back.
Sure.
Patrick, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, sorry. It's not just directly linked to the question, but thank you, Kevin, for the presentation. Very relevant for me, and I wanted to share that these topics for me are very important, because I already see listening to Bernard Stiegler, a French philosopher that that is already dead since last year. but all the warnings he was putting on this idea of Silicon Valley becoming mainstream in the world, and the like the how we said that the lack of in Europe we have like a retard. I don't know how you say that in English, but we have a lack of delay. Yeah, delay, and we will never like get back the delay of that we took on technological solution and innovation that they made in the Silicon Valley for the like 2 decades. And he was actually trying to change the mindset of big groups to be ecologically and social conscious, and to change the paradigm. I don't know, Kevin, did you heard about this topic of Bernard Stiegler?
Yes, of course. Unfortunately, he passed away last year, but I've been to a few of his seminars, and it's interesting what you say. It's something that is said a lot, which is we are 20 years late, and it's too late, and now we are late behind the US, and now we are also late behind China, and we're getting late behind Russia. And this is a notion that is to me really confusing and maybe going the wrong way. So we are late when we're looking at a specific direction, which is the dogma that I just presented. But who says we need to be the fastest and the best at this dogma? The whole question is, where are we trying to go? And so are we really late at anything, or have we been able to take a step back? And now is the time for us to embrace these technologies and to do something with it, because it's a material, it's interesting. It's like when we invented glass. We've been able to do things with glass, and we just didn't stick with wood. So we have this new material we can use, but it would be better to use it in a way that serves our interests, our values, our cultures. And so I'm not sure we're late on the big picture. We're just late on their perspective on this technology, but not on the bigger perspective. And if you take other industries, for example, the car industry, maybe you have this huge trucks in the US that are appropriate for the big roads and the long distances, and in Italy you have cars, but smaller cars, and you have the Vespas, and you have different types of vehicles. So they're not able to build huge trucks, but they've been able to build Vespas that fit the territory. So really this notion of being late is something that is confusing, and that is pushing us in a direction that we don't want to be pushed in.
No, it's definitely because why he talk about a changing mindset, because it's not worth it for Stigler, I think. And
Yes.
yeah, it's a pity that he dies, because he would be proud of the direction recently. For instance, hérétique is taking is really in the way he wanted to push innovation and progress in Europe.
Yeah, he did his job. He inspired a lot of people. So now,
and maybe to follow up on what the two of you just said, I think one of the classic examples for something like that is the autonomous car or the automated car industry, right? Where they are basically pushing out a technologically advanced vehicle in, for example, Silicon Valley, and to train it with most of the millions of miles of training happen in Silicon Valley first, and then they push it out into different regions in America or the US. And then they basically come to Europe and expect, or any, like say something much more drastic, like Iran or Tehran, right? They push it out on the streets there at some point and expect that everything will just work out fine. And kind of bring that back to the discussion of how anthropology could try to help to kind of contextualize these solutions too. I've been working in that field, and we try to investigate how would an autonomous car, for example, be able to interact with other human road users in Europe, for example, or even different cities in Europe, right? We've done now a study in Copenhagen in very busy sections or crossings where you have lots of cyclists rushing through, you have pedestrians crossing in all sorts of directions, and you have an unregulated crossing where the self-driving car would then have to understand, okay, what does this little gesture mean from the cyclist, right? What does that mean? And the same goes for then traffic situations in the UK or Germany or Greece or Italy, where I think anthropologists are well equipped because we are very well trained in observing and understanding context and kind of hidden symbols and signatures, signs, and kind of understand the meaning of small things in daily life. And we are then well equipped to kind of inform these technologies to also deal with those more complex, maybe not standard situations, right? And contexts. So I think that might be one example on how anthropology can help technological solution to be more contextual and situational.
I think to add on to that, I think it's also important to look at the way we see technologies as interacting with societies. So often we think of these innovations as something that is done to a society, where that's really rarely the case. Often these technologies go out and they become appropriated and misused in all sorts of ways and create new innovations that companies don't foresee and often don't ever respond to. So I think as anthropologists, that's a good place of intervention for us to help people start thinking iteratively about how their technologies and their companies interface with society.
Yeah, I'll kind of add on to that because in my work, I've been working and increasingly talking to and collaborating with roboticists and robotics companies. And two things, I guess, adding on to what Marcus and Angela said. Yes, what we bring to the table is our attention to the particular and knowledge of the particular. And also the experiential, right? Which I think is completely obliterated in all of those models that are not rooted in the anthropological thinking. But also based on the whole idea of the experiential, I just wanted to put it out there. I noticed, and it's not a coincidence that most of your examples, Kevin, if not all, were software based. And software-based innovation, it really is eating the world, and it really is a question of how is it that venture capitalists especially prefer it over, for example, hardware innovation. If you're working in a hardware startup, good luck to you. It's very difficult to raise funds, and it's very difficult to actually survive and scale up, precisely because the horizon of capital return is a lot more uncertain and a lot, basically venture capitalists are going to prefer software product over a hardware product. And so very often what you see is that precisely, then going back to this idea of the experiential, what you see is that it's precisely the fact that it's the lack of imagination of how people will experience a hardware product in the future that kind of trips up hardware and especially robotics companies, because they don't they have to address the problem solution kind of dyad always. But what they need to be looking at is we need the imagination here. We need to really imagine in 10 years, what is it that the problem is going to be? And perhaps, the software solutions of today are going to be, problems in 10 years themselves. So, yeah, those are just my 2 cents. But I guess I did the anthropological thing there to particularize, right? To say, oh, but wait, in the hardware world.
Yeah, we do. We actually develop a hardware product too, and we see it's really difficult to develop. And so and the venture capital and the 10x return on investment they're looking for makes it really complicated, but not just for hardware, for software also. It's just that software is by nature more scalable, and so if you go at a VC, it will tell you that you need to do something that is scalable and available for 1 billion people. And to me, really, and it's interesting for me to have your opinion on that, but that really reduces the scope of possible innovation when you say something has to be the same for 1 billion people. Imagine the materials we build our homes with, or the gardens we have in our different parts of the world. Imagine if we had to select a seed of a flower that had to work anywhere on the planet, be it cold, be it hot, be it high altitude, low altitude, how low diversity we would have. And so in my opinion, it's basically the same thing that is happening even with software. This imperative to build something that reaches a $1 billion revenue is really what kills the innovation. And with Derive, our ambition is basically to make 10,000 euros per month for this application. We have other activities, but if we make 10,000 euros per month with this activity, it's well enough to pay the developer and to continue pushing this usage and making people enjoy just strolling in the street. But so just so the question for you guys is how, with your anthropological background and knowledge and practice, how do you see this era as epoch where 1 billion people use the same tool that works in the same way all over the world? Is it something that is shocking to you, or is it something that makes perfect sense and is the sense of history?
Let me just say at this stage how important this question is, and this moment for us is also with the kickstart of the Applied Club of Innovation and Anthropologists, Applied Anthropology. You know, Kevin is not an educated anthropologist, and he's coming from a slightly different world in a way. And if we manage to pitch now the perfect way for why anthropologists have to be included, Kevin will take this out into the world with every next presentation. So with this,
I promise I will.
With these drums, I'm introducing whoever wants to take the stage.
One thing I can maybe, just a jab, of course. I'm not really at home in innovation, but there's one thing, of course, if you're telling about what technologies are going to be widespread, there is a thing that has been quite tense these days, and you see that on many scales, is the tension between the particular and the universal. For instance, as you just said, you know, if you want to use one seed from a garden that can be planted in every garden, what is that seed going to look like? If you can just turn the question a little bit around. Other parts of the world will do different things with those seeds, and we have our own methods and tools for that. We just follow the seed around the world to see what happens with it. And from there on, we can see vernacular ways to deal with how people plant the seeds. How do people, you know, incorporate the seed in other pre-existing acts, for instance? That could be, that's maybe more a classic approach. But of course, the other thing that people have to take into account if they want to scale up their things is that they really have to observe this tension between the particular and the universal. Because if you go too much to either, there's going to be a lack of them. And I think it's something that you should take into account. Just to give you one basic dichotomy to work with, which is at the heart of false dichotomy, because you have, you know, instances that, you know, for instance, the Silicon Valley seems to be like the arrogance of the universal, saying, okay, we want to be, instead of diplomatic, we want to be imperialistic, we want to take over continents, we want to take over markets all over the world, instead of being more negotiating and seeing how this practicality or this particularity actually functions, how this thing actually functions in a particular context. And anthropologists have then, you know, historically, especially in the wake of the crisis of writing culture have been too particular, and actually before that too particular as well, instead of just focusing on human universals and cultural particulars.
Can I just say one thing?
Please.
So I think we can look at this from your question, because when you talk about problem solving, I think it is a mindset that, for instance, developers have. Their mindset is always to fix, 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 fix. So when you have an anthropology part of a developing team, that mindset is broken, because our goal is not to fix, it's to look at everything. So I think that's where we can actually be part of teams and give another perspective, not the perspective of always fixing things and always try to get the solution. So that's just it. Thank you.
Cool.
Very nice. The other thing I wanted to mention is that what anthropology also looks at often is kind of the rituals of life, or also the rituals of daily life. And that's why I, when I went to API days and I saw your presentation, Kevin, and you started talking about flaneur and just wandering around, strolling around the city, also enjoying this kind of moment. For me, this seems very much like a ritual of just also relaxing and exploring at the same time. And I think that's something that anthropologists are also good, kind of spotting those things and what kind of meaning is hidden beyond certain actions in daily life, which is something that other people might say, okay, how can we make you faster running through the activity? Whereas we might say, okay, how can we emphasize the meaning for you that activity has for you?
I would also add that one of the strengths of anthropology is really just in the challenge and the provocation that anthropology poses, because we're always there to ask why and how and along what lines of power. For me, a lot of my fieldwork was just walking around and saying, okay, when you say innovation, what does that mean? And coming back and saying, okay, does innovation mean a new technology? Does it mean a new business? Does it mean change in society? Does it mean something positive? Or is it a promise that entrepreneurship makes to create change through technology? And how all of these layered meanings can be used interchangeably to shift people in certain directions without them quite knowing. But what the strength of anthropology is kind of getting in there and getting into that nitty gritty. And to use an old phrase, we like to make the familiar strange and the strange familiar, right? So I think that's really the strength that anthropology can do. So we can go into, say, a startup ecosystem and ask, why do we gatekeep resources in this way? When we say, for example, when we're talking about hardware, it's hard to get those startup funds, but oftentimes hardware could be the thing we need. So where are the points where there's stress, where we can't get those funds, and why are they in place? In what way can we change that to create new strategies that are perhaps more creative than you would when you take for granted that, say, venture capital or risk funding is the only way to do it, where it's going to require that kind of linear progression from idea to business to scale to exit, right? Because it's the only way to do it for them. But it isn't the only way to fund businesses or even nonprofits to solve problems or do whatever else we're trying to do. There's a lot of other ways to go about it. But when we create these ideologies that it's the only way, I think the best way to stop that is to break them apart and make them more complicated than anyone ever thought.
Thanks. I really like I didn't know the making the familiar strange and making the strange familiar, which is a really interesting way of looking at your job. It's
I'll
like
add
when
to
you
that another golden oldie, but very true one. What people say and what people do and what people say they do are three different things. It goes into that idea of anthropologists complexify everything, and it's a good thing. Yeah.
Nice. The other thing that I also realized when I saw Kevin's presentation at the API days, I saw that he's talking specifically about richness, right? And richness is something that we talk about all the time as anthropologists. We talk about groundedness and richness in going out, right? If you look at a certain behavior, activity, or whatever symbol, and the classic, here's the oldie but goodie from my side, right? Somebody's twinking with the eye. What does it mean? And if you're in a club setting, it might be a flirty move. If you are, I don't know, hinting to your rubbery friend, then you might say, okay, you can start going into the bank now. So there's lots of different hidden meanings again behind a very simple sign or conveyed message. And this kind of richness that depends on the context and being grounded in the context of the situation is something that anthropologists usually dig out.
But it's really nice to see these words that collide together and merge. And how, just a question, but how do you define groundedness more than richness? Because richness is really open, but groundedness, how do you define it? How do you capture it? Because it's the thing we have the more difficulty to capture, I guess. Richness really because richness really opens the debate and opens the possibilities. Groundedness more closes them. So I find it more difficult to envision.
With grounded Terry.
Well, okay. What does it? Yeah, Emic.
Who wants to explain that?
Well, I might try. No, I don't want to, but I will. Patrick, he sends me on this. Well, grounded as in French we say ancré, which means like it's coming out from where you actually are looking into. So as émique, as opposite to éthique without the H. So émique means it comes out from whatever you're looking at. And éthique comes out from outside. So it's a matter of point of view. If you look from inside or from the as an outsider or as an insider. So here, yeah, grounded theory. You want it to be ancré. You want it to come. You want your theory basically to be inspired as much as possible by the people you are analyzing.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's right. Sorry, Laura, you can jump right in a second. I just make one comment. If you look at the Flanerie app, I think it's the other name, right? I forget the real name of the app. What was it?
Derive.
If you look at that and you would say, okay, the Google Maps is looking onto a specific plaza, and you just say, okay, there are people moving and he wants to get from A to B, then you would say this is the most direct connection and this is the ethic view in a way, right? But what you try is to say, okay, what does the Parisian want to get out of that specific plaza? And the emic view then tells you actually he wants to kind of explore the setting and walk around a bit and experience the place in a way, right? And this is the perspective of the person that you are looking into.
So the emic one. No, it's cool. So basically, we're not anthropologists, but we've been able to recreate some of your principles. So
actually, I was thinking about that exact same about derive and about the map. So another, I think, fairly known in anthropology circles, but I think very accurate metaphor for what anthropology is and does and how it contributes, is that the map is not the terrain. Which is how we explain it. And the terrain is always, it's grounded in that it's experiential and that it's anthropology is inquiry of based on relating. And so for me, it was very telling that when you said, in Paris, some streets are smelly, some streets are narrow. The very fact that you said some streets are smelly made me smile, because that's a relation to a place, right? That you could never get from Google, right? You would never get that kind of experiential component from a map. You can only get it from having a relationship and experiential relationship to the terrain. And so in that sense, I think Derive is very much anthropological, even if that's not what you were aiming for originally.
I think it's what we were aiming for, but more from our guts, not from our brain, but really experiencing it. But I'll be happy if one of you wants to look deeper in it and analyze it with us. It would be super cool to see how you see it. We just started now, but I'm really glad you liked it and you see the depth in our research.
I really would like to have Derive for Berlin now, because I'm just moved to Berlin. And what else can you do than walking around in a spring day during Corona times,
Sure,
right?
sure.
The only thing you can really do is Derive, flaneur.
Exactly.
We are already approaching the end of this session, I think, slowly. I want to be a bit more mindful of time than I was the last times, because I also get people complaining about me always pulling over the time. So unless somebody has something urgent to tell us still, Patrick Lass, yeah, I would like to give Kevin the stage again and also maybe reflect a bit what he has learned from us today, because I'm sure that we have learned a lot from you and this was very inspiring. So a big applause again. Big thank you for coming and presenting your ideas and your experiences and the things you do with Hérétique. But yeah, I would like to hear from you maybe some last sentences on what you learned about anthropologists and how you think we could help the topics of innovation there.
First of all, thank you very much for the conversation, for your insights, your reactions, your ideas, everything you shared. It's really unusual to have this two-side conversation, so I really enjoyed it. I think the basic thing I learned is I should have studied anthropology. I didn't know about it when I was starting college, but if I had to do it again, maybe that's what I would have done. No, but I've written down a lot of the things and the concepts you shared. I've copy pasted a lot of the things that were in the conversation. So I have to learn to search them and to dig deeper and to see what's behind all the words. But ultimately, I think that in what we are trying to bring to the table is the same perspective that you are professional into, like but we are trying to mix some of your discipline with company strategy and economics and experience design, and so at one point we will need your core competencies to make our work better. So for now, we are trying to explore everything, but at one point we will need experts. And I'm sure from all the discussions we've had that if we want to have innovations that are not just copy paste from the Silicon Valley and are anchored and are rich and that fit with our societies, your competencies have to be put at the forefront. And so I don't really know how this has to be marketed. But from what Laura said, you could be specialists in marketing too. So this is like the snake eating its own tail. But I will leave my email address too. So, and any of you, if you want to exchange, I'll be very happy to. And I'll keep you posted about what we do. And I'll be happy to follow up with the conversation because it was a really great time for me. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Kevin. And I also want to end the session with kind of what we are good in here in the network is that we are sort of developing friendships that also try to help each other out and continue sparing, continue exchanging. And I can totally see that happening with you and Hérétique. So I think if you, I don't know, want to have some more contextual feedback or whatever, us trying out your app, looking into a certain topic, looking into a certain cultural topic or whatever, I think many of us will be more than happy to re-engage with you or help you out, and yeah, continue the discussion.
Really cool. It's a pleasure.
Nice. Other than that, everyone listen up. We will be announcing the Apply Club for Innovation very soon. Tomorrow we will also announce the leadership of the Apply Club for Digital Methods and Remote Research, which, by the way, somebody just posted, Digital Tribes. We are also looking into kind of the social virtual spaces and how people interact there. So this is also another competency of anthropology that has been developed over the last years, decades. Yeah, and I think there's definitely more things to come. Also, watch out for look out for the fuck up next week that we will also start promoting tomorrow. And with that, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Impulse. Please join us next time when our speaker is Evita Hajikova. Remember to subscribe to be alerted when we post our next episode, and follow us on social media for updates on our upcoming events. We're @Anthro on Twitter, world_needs_Anthro on Instagram, and EASA Applied Anthropology Network on LinkedIn.